Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Now today I've got a very special guest. I'm joined by Tom Canton from the Gooner TV YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining me today. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, really looking forward to this. In today's video, we will be discussing a bit about the transfer window and the season coming up. But I thought we could just briefly touch on the Community Shield win and what a great win that was for us. I did want to ask you about it though. Do you think that will really help the team with like confidence and belief going into the season?
Of course, I think that had we have not won the game, the manner that we performed and the competition that I think we showed against City was important as well because too many times we've faced City and not been able to be as competitive as we'd like. I remember that game that we played against them at home. I think it was in 21 where we went 1-0 up through Bukayo Saka. It might have been 22 actually in January, and they obviously came back, and Xhaka gave away that penalty, and it wasn't exactly the game that we wanted it to be in the end. But ultimately, that was a really damaging one, and despite we thinking it was going to be something of a momentum giver, it ended up a little bit derailing January and then the start of February as well. And I don't think we managed to win a single game that month in January after that result. But I feel like this one, had we even not won, would have still given plenty of kind of encouragement. But getting the actual win itself and that bit of silverware, was great. I mean, I was standing just outside the dressing room in the mix zone after the game, and you could hear the players like celebrating. And I know that people might try and take the mick out of that a bit because it's just a community shield, as people like to say. But actually, I think it is really important to celebrate those wins and use that as kind of a trampoline to jump you forward somewhat. So yeah, I think it was really important we got the win, and it will be something of a momentum pusher for us.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I think if we hadn't won it, like I don't think the team would have I think they can pick themselves up from these things because we've shown that we've got I think there's been a real change in mentality with this team. So I think we would have gotten through it, but I think it would have been hard going to the season because we really do struggle to beat Man City. Like even though we've beaten them on penalties, like I'll still take that. I think in a way we deserve to win. I think we've shown that we could fight back and Trossard scored that goal as well to help us win. But for you, like obviously we know it's a Community Shield game. Like I see it as it's a trophy to win, and it's a good trophy to win. But for you, do you think we will like be more able to compete with Man City this season? Because we know last season we really struggled to kind of compete with them. We might have lacked that experience. So this season, do you expect that we'll compete with them?
Yeah, I do. I think that the business that's been done by both clubs indicates something of a gap being closed. Arsenal have invested with Raya coming in, who I'm sure we'll talk about. Like
Yeah.
that's close to 230, 40 million pounds that we've now spent this summer. While City have brought in Kovacic, and Guardiola's also now come in, and there's suggestions that they might be going after Lucas Paqueta as well of West Ham. I don't think that necessarily keeps the gap as wide as it was prior to the start of this window. Rice is a massive, massive pull for us. The fact that we beat Man City to signing him in itself is a big victory and something of a win. He was getting booed every time he was on the ball or mentioned by the Man City fans in the stadium. So that kind of tells you their kind of view of that. They thought that he would want to join them over us, but it weren't to be in that instance. I think that Kovacic again is a good player, but Gundogan is such a big loss for them.
Yeah.
Mahrez as well. Whereas Arsenal haven't lost key players. They've extended Saka, they've extended Martinelli, they've extended Ramsdale, they've extended Gabriel as well at the back, and it's been massive in regards to kind of players that we've managed to keep at the club. So uh, I do think the gap has closed, and we will be competing with them next season for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think last season we obviously didn't have the experience with like Declan Rice. I think Timber as well. I think like when I saw him play, I was like so stunned by how amazing he was. I think defensively we're a lot more tight now and we've got more depth. Like, if Sinchenko can't play, there's other options like Tierney as well. So and Tomiyasu will be back this season. So I do expect us to be more competitive in the season. I did want to touch on the transfer window as well. We've obviously brought in a few players, like Declan Rice, Timber, Kai Havertz. For you, what have you made of the transfer window so far?
I think it's gone beyond what I thought actually we might end up doing. I always said at the start of the window that if Arsenal were serious, they need to be looking to spend upwards of £200 million and bringing in players that were going to push the needle. But also they had to keep some players as well. I mean, keeping Thomas Partey, keeping him and competing with Declan Rice was always important, especially when we lost Granit Xhaka, because Xhaka's presence was so key that if you'd have lost him and Partey at the same summer, you would have been looking at trying to replace, two-thirds of a midfield rather than just one piece of it, which is hard enough for a player that scored 7 and assisted 7 last season in Xhaka, and also is a massive presence in the dressing room. But Rice is a fantastic leader as well as what we know of his footballing abilities as well, and he brings competition and the ability to play with Partey as well, as we've seen in the Community Shield. So that's a big plus. Kai Havertz was a surprise. I don't think many of us expected Kai Havertz to come in. But I think that there's been good and bad things about him. I think that's expected. He's come off the back of a frustrating time with Chelsea where they've misused him. It's really damaged his confidence. I'm not sure that even he really knows what his best role is in the Premier League. And so the fact that he took that move when Bayern Munich were also interested, like he could have gone to Bayern, which are a team that he would have been able to be very comfortable in, be very dominant in every game they play. But instead, he decided to have a preference of Arsenal, make that move happen to Arsenal, and take on another challenge and challenge himself, which I think from a mental standpoint is impressive on his part. And as you mentioned, Timber, I said at the start of the window that I think he was being kind of overlooked because of how big of the deals for Rice and Havertz were. But his presence has been probably the most impactful of any of those three so far. Great at right back, great at left back, so technically gifted. I love the little step overs and turns that he kind of shimmied away from the City players on Sunday. That was great. And then the potential signing of Raya, it's been agreed to my understanding. So that to bring in competition for Ramsdale is great. I like Ramsdale a lot. I think he's been fantastic. And I think he's been a real step up in goalkeeper for us. But having someone that's several levels above Turner to compete with Ramsdale is going to only bring good things for us. I think that the ultimate winner of that scenario will be one of those two, but Arsenal definitely win in that scenario, which is the key thing.
Yeah, and I think talking on the goalkeeper situation, I did watch a bit of an interview yesterday with Ramsdale, and he was asked like, what does he think about having that competition? He said like, bring it on, and I thought it just shows you that he's ready for that fight because in football. Sometimes you do have to compete, when Zinchenko came in, him and Tierney had to do that a bit, and Tierney probably liked that a bit because it makes you a better player because you want to be in the team more. So I definitely think that'll be a good thing for Ramsdale. Talking on Matt Turner, obviously we know he's going to be at Nottingham Forest soon, around 10 million. When you heard this news, like what were your thoughts on it, and what do you make of the price?
Yeah, as I say, I was surprised that we went for a goalkeeper. I didn't realise that I thought we needed one until really we started moving for Raya, because I didn't necessarily see Arsenal being able to secure another keeper of that level. It's
Yeah,
I always talk about the backup goalkeeper position being one of the most difficult positions to fill in a squad, because you've got to bring in a player that's of a standard that, if they're needed, are good enough to be called upon, but at the same time are willing and understanding enough to know that they're probably not going to get as many minutes as they'd like. And I suppose the way around that, like we did when we bought Ramsdale, which many thought was a really expensive backup to Leno, rather than being his replacement, was actually to bring in someone that could beat Leno, in that
yeah,
position. And maybe we're doing that again. I don't know, because I think that there's still scope for Ramsdale to bat away this competition from Raya. The idea of investing 25+ million pounds in Raya is not. I don't think it's not entirely about saying this guy is going to replace Ramsdale. I think it's to say that we're investing in making that position better and making Ramsdale better as well, and that there'll probably be one winner at the end of that. And in 1 or 2 years, which I don't think this is a sustainable dynamic. I don't think you can have Raya and Ramsdale for year on year on year. I think maybe 1 or 2 years is what we'll see in the dynamic, and then one of them will probably move on. But both of them will still be in their 20s in 2 years' time. You'll still be able to get a really good sale value off of either of them, and you would have made one or both of them, in my opinion, better with this. So I think that you look at the Chelsea situation, they had Kepa, they spent a lot of money on him. They brought in Mendy when they weren't happy with Kepa, and Kepa's the one that's actually outlasted Mendy in the end, despite them spending 30 odd million quid on him. So it's not guaranteed that Raya will succeed Ramsdale. And Ramsdale, as you mentioned with that interview, saying bring it on. I think that's the attitude that he's got to have. He's come into a team and taken Leno's place, so he can't expect that it's going to be plain sailing for him forever at a club like Arsenal, and it's not. So I love the signing. I think it's really a shrewd bit of business and one that Arsenal surprisingly needed to do, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, like, it came as a surprise. I mean, I think with Matt Turner, when he's been playing for us, I think he's been okay. I think he's done his job, but I definitely feel like he's our second choice. I didn't feel like he was competing with Ramsdale, and I suppose for Ramsdale, it'll probably be good for him, like you said, to make him a better player. And it will definitely be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, I think it'd be a good signing for sure. I just want to touch on Jesus because we know he's going to be out for probably a month or two with his injury, and he was injured for a bit last season. For you, like, we know we've got Eddie Nketiah as well, Havertz, but do you think we should bring another striker in, or do you think we'll be okay as we are?
I'd love to add a world class forward. I don't know who wouldn't want to be up for that, but the market at the moment really isn't in a place where I see obvious candidates, to bring in. It's really easy to list off names like you're playing a video game like Osimhen or, players like that. But after Hoyland's gone to Man United and Gonzalo Ramos has gone to PSG, and there aren't that many. Kolo Muani's one of those. I think that would be a great player, but again, I don't see Arsenal spending 80 odd million quids on someone like him, which is what I think Frankfurt would be looking for to try and get him away from there. He's also being linked with PSG as well at the same time, and Bayern Munich I think have also got an interest in him. If they don't get Kane, they might go after him. So it's difficult to see who you bring in. So I think that we need to look at bringing in a versatile forward that can play both on the right and through the middle. And I look at Mohamed Kudus, as we've been linked to, as someone that can do that, has done that for Ajax, has played on the right, because I think we need a bit more competition for Saka. I don't think you can bring in anyone that's going to take over Saka's position.
Yeah.
What you can bring in is someone that's a closer standard to him than, say, Reece Nelson is right now. I like Reece Nelson, but I think that we need more guarantees about the competition if Saka, for some reason, whatever reason, is not there. We've been very lucky with Saka that he's been pretty much, touch wood, reliable the entire time he's been with us and been available for us as well. But it would be good to give him time on the bench, give him rests when we need to give him rest, bring him off earlier in the games if we can afford to. So I think a Kudus who can play right wing, can play centre forward, can play attack in midfield would be a really good option. Another player might be Pedro Gonçalves, who plays at Sporting. He's had a fantastic couple of seasons in Portugal. Used to play at Wolves. Went through at Valencia and came back to Portugal after playing previously, I think, with Braga. He's very good. Can play centre forward. Can play on the right. Can play in central midfield even. So he's a very, very versatile player too. So there are some options out there, but they are expensive still. You're looking at, I think Brighton agreed a 40 million euro deal with Ajax for Kudus, but that is not kind of tipped over because there's a feeling that he might prefer a move to a bigger team. But Brighton are the only team to agree a fee at this moment in time, so they're in pole position if they want to try and get him. They just got to try and agree on personal terms. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, definitely. I think like we have strengthened in great positions like in midfield, and we're bringing a goalkeeper in, and defensively we've strengthened. But I still think like the striker is a position we sort of need to strengthen in. But I think we also know with Balogun, his future is a bit uncertain. I think. I'm under the impression he probably will leave Arsenal, but for you, like we haven't really brought a striker in at the moment. Obviously, with Havertz, sort of depends on which position he plays because I know he can do midfield as well. But for you, like, would you want to keep Balogun or do you think we should just get the money for him?
I would have loved to have kept him if his idea was that he knew he was coming back and that the guarantee of starting minutes wasn't going to be there and that he felt that he's going to have to fight for it. Now, the comments that he made on the US tour weren't what I was hoping to hear,
Mhm,
saying things like, yeah, he felt he didn't need to necessarily prove himself or try extra hard, etc. That's not what I want to hear from a player that I wanted to see come back and really try and fight. I think he probably sealed his exit clause with those words, to be honest. And Arteta would want a player with the attitude. And let's not say he's got a bad attitude. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, you know, it's an attitude to understand where you're at. He had a brilliant season in France last year with Reims, and I think that ultimately that he's still not done anything for Arsenal. Like,
mhm.
it's all well and good saying he scored 20 goals plus 21 goals, I think, in Liga. but you still haven't done anything at Arsenal. You know, you can't come back to Arsenal after being on loan and doing well after one season and saying, because I did that, I have to be guaranteed a starting place. If that is, and he has never said that, but he's never come out and said, I want guaranteed starts. He wants guarantees over minutes, but not necessarily starts. And Arteta just can't give that. You know, we brought in Havertz, who we've seen now is an option at centre forward. We've got Jesus, who's only going to be out for a few weeks rather than, you know, a significant period of time. And Ketia, I think, has been good. You know, I think that his performance off the bench against the Man City was really good. I think that went overlooked, actually, how good he
Mm.
was when he came off the bench. He took the long balls down really well. He was progressive, good touches, good technical ability. He also had a really good game against Monaco, especially in the first half in the Emirates Cup. And I've always kind of feel like I'm in a position of writing Eddie off, because I just feel like if the Arsenal want to challenge for a title, I just don't see Eddie Nketiah being that guy that does it.
Mm.
And I've always wanted him to try and prove me wrong. And I spoke to him after the Emirates Cup game for FL in the mix zone, and a lot of the questions that were being asked to him were, how do you feel about the fact you're going to be filling in for Jesus and stepping in for Jesus? And there was a part of me that was feeling he must be sick to death of being asked
Yeah.
about stepping in and filling in for people. And I asked him about, you know, his relationship with Declan Rice, because he played with him as a youngster, and I asked him about taking the captaincy because he was the England under-21 captain as well, and you know how that process came about, because I think he has to try and change the conversation around him from being a stand-in to just being Eddie Nketiah and being that guy that can, just when he comes into the team, it's not a case of he's coming in because he's filling in for someone, but he's starting because he deserves to start. And he didn't necessarily achieve that last season because Trossard came in for him at centre forward and did really well. And I really like Trossard at centre forward, and I think that really damaged Nketiah's kind of profile to some degree. So if Nketiah is to start any games, and if he starts against Forest, he needs to score and he needs to play really well, and he needs to kick off a season on the front foot. So whilst I'd love a striker, you know, and whilst I'd love to bring in somebody, I think that the options that we've got still do suffice to some degree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, like, with Nketiah, I do think he's a good player, like you said, but I think for me, he probably could score about 10 goals in the season
Mm.
or in competitions. But like, if we won the league, I don't know if he's our guy, but he definitely can help us with that. And I definitely feel bad for him having to answer those questions that are hard for him, because I think a lot of us probably would want Jesus to play because he can score goals. He's showing that for Man City, and he also has this great hold up play that we miss. But I definitely think people can be a bit harsh on Eddie sometimes. But I do think, I think we'll have to sort of see how it goes with like that, because I think with Trossard, like, I definitely think he should start a lot more than he's starting, because he does take a lot of his opportunities, like we saw in the Community Shield, and I think he's been a really good addition to this side. So I really, really hope that he gets more chances in the starting lineup. But going on to like the season, we have strengthened a lot. We've got more experience. Do you think we've done enough in the transfer window to kind of win the league and win some trophies next season?
I think we've done pretty much everything that we can do. I think that, as I say, the only other position I think that we could bring in is a versatile forward, and we'll see if that happens. I think there's still scope. Certainly, Arsenal are still open to adding, and Arteta's spoken about that. That if there's an opportunity, that we'll do it. I know that's kind of the club line, if you like, that if there's an opportunity, we'll do it. But it is true. If they do see somebody that they think is good enough and that they feel is the right fit, they will try and bring that player in. As I've said to people before, it's not about budgets. It's not about if we spend 25 million on Raya, it doesn't mean we can bring in a forward. If Arsenal value a player at a certain level and they can get them close to their valuation they can or below it, they will go and do that, because they know that the investment is worth it. And then they won't need to invest that money later on down the line because they know they've got the right player now.
Mm.
Um, I think our squad is in the best position it can be to try and compete with City. I think beyond City, we are the best equipped side in the league. I think Liverpool have got deficiencies in midfield and defence. I think Chelsea losing Nkunku is massive for them until December. Him being injured is probably their best player, actually, and they've lost him until December. Jackson looks good. Mudryk looks improved. Sterling looks a bit better. Enzo Fernandez is a fantastic player. They've moved out a lot of the deadwood that they needed to. Poch is a good coach, but let's see. It may not work. They've got Liverpool on the opening day. Two of probably the most wild cards, I think, for next season are Chelsea and Liverpool. So seeing that opening game is going to be very interesting. Man United, I think Højlund has a lot of questions about him because he's, only scored 9 league goals in Serie A, and
Mm,
Anthony I don't particularly rate. Sancho looks better. And Rashford is Rashford, does very, very well. And then it's about, is Ten Hag going to take that team to the next level? He's a good manager, but Man United just lack something of the old Man
mm,
United still, and have done obviously for the better part of a decade and more. So it'll be intriguing to see how their season gets on. They seem to win games just by being slightly better than the opponent, and not necessarily giving me or others confidence that they are back to, with a without the better use of a word. But I think that other clubs like Spurs are going to be really in trouble if they lose Kane. Even if he
mm.
stays, I really wouldn't put them beyond top 7 potentially. Brighton, if they keep Caicedo, I think can be a real force next season. If they don't keep Caicedo, they've still got a good team, but lack that star that they've had with McAllister. They've lost now, and him. And then Aston Villa are a team to look out for, of course. Moussa Diaby's a really good signing for them. Unai Emery's doing a really good job. Ollie Watkins is a fantastic striker for them. And yeah, they've done some really interesting. Tielemans as well coming into, some interesting business. So very interested by them. Burnley are one to look out for because of Kompany and what he's done. Turned them
Yeah.
into a very good side last season in the Championship. And yeah, there's some really interesting sides in the league next season. I think we've got a great opening game against Forest at home. That's a great opportunity. If in a way, the pressure's on because the expectation is you win that and you win that well, and we should do. And the first time we play Man City, I think, is in October. So if we've got a good momentum going into that game, and I know we've got games against, I think, Manchester United and Spurs before then, it's going to be good if we can maintain some momentum going into that game.
Yeah, definitely. I think like with last season, it was just us and Man City. And this season, there's so many other teams. Like, definitely think Liverpool will get better. They've done a lot of business in the window, and Man City definitely up there as well. And it's with United. I've said that I think they've definitely gotten better, but I think for me, like us and Man City, I just think we're a little bit ahead of them at the moment. But like as well, Newcastle, they've done so good under Eddie Howe, and it's going to be so tough next season. But for you, like last season, we did go all out in the league. We didn't really. I think we did try, but I feel like in other competitions we were more focused on the league. So for you next season, would you want us to kind of put more of a strong team out when we say in the Carabao Cup, the FA Cups? We all know we've got the Champions League as well, but would you like us to put stronger teams out and kind of go for it as well in like the other competitions?
I think we can afford to now,
Yeah.
because we've got this depth of squad. I think if you run through the team, you can probably come up with a. I think we all know what our best team is. I think it's what we probably started against Man City, bar Jesus in for Havertz. I think that's probably our best team, or maybe Zinchenko in for Timber. And if you run through the team now with Raya coming in, you can have Raya, you could have Tomiyasu at right back. You could have still technically Rob Holding, but you've got other players. You've got Kivior can come in at left centre back. You've still got Tierney. We've still got Timber or Zinchenko to play there. You've got Jorginho, who I think is still very underrated. I really like Jorginho. I think he's a top level player, and we've got him as a depth option. You can then play Havertz and Vieira, in midfield, or you can bring Smith Rowe into it if you want to. If Nelson gets back to full fitness, he's an asset and has shown he can score in big moments for us. And Ketia up top, as I say, I think this season's a really important season for him and has shown his quality. And you got someone like Trossard as well, who I think should really be starting, at the moment, because I think he's been fantastic. But if Arteta doesn't see him as a starter, you can still rotate him in for certain games. I think that's the biggest question around Arteta this season, is not just how do we go stronger in the cup competitions, but how do we rotate in general, and how successful is he as a coach going to be at making tweaks to the team? I don't think we can play the starting 11 that we want to every single week. I think you've got to make one or two changes per week and, refresh players, give players a rest, but at the same time, keep those partnerships and momentums growing and building and keep moving forwards. But yeah, I think that we've now given ourselves plenty of depth to be able to make changes to this team if we want to in those cup competitions.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think like last season it was a bit more difficult to kind of put a strong team out because like say if like Saliba got injured early on or Gabriel got injured, then
Mm.
we're in trouble, and then that leaves Holding for like with one of the players. So I think we didn't have that depth we have now. I think like you said we could afford to do that because we've got a lot a bigger team now. Like Man City, when they've been in those competitions, they can afford to put like a weaker team out, which isn't weak. But I think for us, that's what we couldn't do. I did want to ask you a bit about the Champions League, though. It'll be our first season back in it. It feels quite surreal. We're finally back in it. For you, what are your expectations of that? How far do you think we can go in it?
I do think we're one of the top 5 or 6 teams, in that competition. It'll be interesting to see who we get in the draw, which is, I think, the day before deadline day, 31st of August, I think the draw is. So Europa League is actually on deadline day, so that's gonna be a busy day for anyone covering that sort of thing. But I think there is a real chance for Arsenal to get into the latter stages. I think quarterfinals is a minimum. Um,
Yeah,
Obviously, it depends on who you get. You could get I don't know, not Real Madrid, but Barcelona or Bayern Munich in the group stage. You could get someone from pot three that's also a big team, but you could end up getting someone really difficult in the first knockout round, depending on who finishes second. The amount of times that we've seen Real Madrid or Bayern or Barca finish second, or and then have to play a team that have come first, thinking they're going to get themselves an easy draw, and in fact they got a very difficult one. So it will depend very much on the draw, and that's why I do find it hard where I say minimum quarterfinals, but it does depend on who you come up against. I've put City to win every tournament because they are the favourites for every tournament they enter. They won't win every tournament, I don't think, but you'd be tricky to bet against them in any competition they enter because they are the best team in each of the competitions. Real Madrid alongside them in the Champions League, of course, even though they did finish behind Barcelona in La Liga, they, for me, still are the stronger team, especially with Bellingham that they've brought in, and they've got another year of Vinicius, and it'll be interesting how they replace Benzema and how they successfully do that. But they could yet bring in Mbappe this summer, so that's also something to think about. But I'd like to think that Arsenal will look at the Champions League as a real opportunity. We've seen sides like RB Leipzig, Villarreal reach semi-finals. Inter Milan themselves, reaching the final last season. If Inter Milan had won, the Champions League, which they only lost 1-0 to Man City,
mhm,
and they had opportunities as well if it weren't for Lukaku blocking their own shot on the line. But they might have had a better chance to win that game, and that would have been a massive achievement for Inter Milan. And so, if a side like that, a side like Napoli, Milan, other Milan sides like AC, get into that stage, there is a great chance for Arsenal. It is something to do with the draw, of course, always. But
yeah.
when you get a big team, you've got to turn up. And I think, why not try and go as far as we can? We absolutely should be targeted to try and go as far as we can in that competition.
Yeah, definitely. I think the team will probably go in with in the mindset of like trying to go as far as they can, and like you said, we never know like which games we'll have early on, like because it will be tough with some of the games we have to play. But I think for me, like in recent years, we did really get battered. It was quite embarrassing to watch, but I think now it's a lot different. So I do think the team will go for it and, see how far they can go. And I think for me, if we got to like, the quarterfinals or semi-finals, I think I'd be happy with that. I think I just want us to kind of go for the league again and maintain that and see how far we can go in the Champions League. But I think I think I think with the Champions League, I think it's sensible to think that it's our first season back in there, so I don't want to expect too much of the team in their first season, but I do think we will go for it, and I hope we do. Um, Also, we know with Jorginho, he is expected to stay at Arsenal now after, a lot of rumours of him going, but what do you think of Jorginho at Arsenal? Like, he's been here for a season, and what do you think he brings to the team?
Yeah, I think that yeah, those links to Turkey
Yeah.
came out of a place where if you're a side that are looking for a very good midfielder, you're obviously looking for a player that's not getting as many starts as maybe they would want, and Jorginho fits that bill. But Jorginho displaced Partey at the end of last season. I think maybe we would quickly forget that Partey was benched and eventually brought into the team at right back to try and get him back into the side, because Jorginho was on, just bluntly performing better than Partey was, and doing a better job. And I think that when we signed him, because there was such a clamour for Caicedo in that January window, whoever we brought in, it was going to feel like a step down from that. And so I think Jorginho suffered a little bit from a profile perspective on that. But To sign him on an 18-month contract with an option of a further year was a really smart bit of business by Arsenal, because you brought in a player that brings valuable experience, that can play at a really good standard, was starting for Chelsea up until that point before they brought in Fernandes. So this wasn't someone that was on the fringes of Chelsea. This is someone that had won the Champions League not so long ago and the European Championship as well. So I think that what he brings to this team is just simply quality and experience, and a slightly different style as well to Partey. He likes to take the ball past the ball. Very kind of Italian deep midfielder that will just kind of orchestrate play. I irk to make comparisons to Pirlo, but we think about Pirlo as somebody that was all about passing, and Jorginho very much so is a great orchestrator from the deep part of the midfield. And I think Arteta has wanted him for a long time. I remember when we were being linked to Houssem Aouar and that saga in 2020. Jorginho was being talked about at the end of that window as potentially someone that Arteta really wanted. And similar to Raya, it seems that if Arteta likes somebody, it feels like only a matter of time until he gets that
Yeah.
player. And Jorginho was that. And certainly it seemed Partey was that to some extent as well. And now Raya this season was that also. So I like the guy. I think he adds real good depth. And for a position that, I mean, back in the day, we're saying we've still not replaced Vieira, we've still not replaced Gilberto Silva, and we're saying it for year and year and year. And now we've got Partey, Rice, Jorginho. I think we personally have the best collection of deep midfielders on the planet. I don't think there is another team on earth that has the same level in terms of three options of that quality in that position. Because you look at City, Rodri's world class, but then it's Calvin Phillips. You look at Real Madrid and they've got Chouameni, but beyond that, they've got a lot of centre mids like Cruz and Valverde and Bellingham, but not DMs. Um, Chelsea, Enzo Fernandez, they want Caicedo, of course, that would add another dimension too. But I just look at what we've got and think that's the best collection of defensive midfielders as a group of three in the world. So what depth there is fantastic, and credit to Edu and the team for bringing them in.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked Jorginho. Like you said, there were times where Partey was on the bench and he was playing over him. Like he's shown that quality on the pitch, and I think he's really good with the ball, passing it forward and keeping not losing the ball as much. Because I think towards the end of last season we were a bit sloppy there. So I think he definitely adds that, and I think a lot of people did judge him before he came to Arsenal. I think, he's not the player he probably used to be, but he's still got a lot of quality in him. So I think if we did, lose him, I would be upset because I think he's a player that adds quality. And like you said, um, you can add him on for minutes. Like if we're doing really good in a game, he's good to bring on to kind of waste a bit of time. But yeah, I think he's a good player that adds a lot of quality, and I'm really really happy to have him at Arsenal. Um, Talk on a few players that I think should they be loaned out this summer? Maybe should we is it time for them to move on? We know there's a few players that went on loan. We know like Tavares, Lokonga, Cedric, and we also know Rob Holding has been here a little while. For you, do you think this is sort of the right time to maybe move some of them on, or do you think they're good to have maybe as a bit of squad depth now?
Well, I think we've done so well to bring so many players in that it's difficult to see where Lokonga or Tavares fits in. At left back, we've got Tierney at the moment still here, Zinchenko, Timber, Kivior, Tomiyasu. So where is Tavares going to play?
Yeah.
We've just been talking about the options we got at deep midfield, even though I think Lokonga is more of an 8 than a 6. Still, you're not going to see him getting into this team over Rice or over Havertz in that left row, or Smith Rowe, or even Vieira. He's just not going to play. So I feel as though the right move is to probably, with the amount of time we got left on Lokonga's deal, probably loan him for this season, get him into that Burnley team, get him playing week in, week out in the Premier League, raise his value, sell him next summer. The same could be said for Tierney as well. There's been links to Real Sociedad on loan. I know that immediately, and certainly the reaction I've got in my comment sections is people saying, why on earth would you loan Tierney? Well, quite simply, if there's no one coming in to buy him this summer and you aren't going to play him enough in the next season to raise his value or raise his profile, why not send him out on loan when you've got 4 options at left back without him? Get him playing week in, week out in a top league like La Liga, and when he comes back in 24 with 2 years left still on his deal, sell him for a really good fee after a really good season. So I think that maybe is actually more of an option than maybe people are giving credit to. Rob Holding, I have a sneaking suspicion he might stay.
Mm.
two reasons. One being a lack of genuine interest at a really good level. But as I have said for quite some time, I feel that the end of the window is when players like Rob Holding do move. So don't be surprised if there is a deadline day deal to be done. You know, the season would have started, players might have got injured, top targets for clubs aren't gettable. And so they start going down their list of alternatives. And I think Rob Holding will be on the list of a number of clubs as potentially an alternative centre half to sign. So it might be toward deadline day that we see Rob Holding move. But Arteta loves his presence, loves what he brings to the squads. He does rate him. I know he's not rated by the majority of Arsenal fans. And that's not because he's bad. It's because Saliba is world class. And it's because we've been blessed with such a fantastic centre half that it does highlight the gap between him and a player like Holding and the deficiencies of Holding, that he's not as good progressively. You know, he's not got the speed of Saliba. And although I remember that FA Cup game against Erling Haaland where I thought he played really, really well until halftime and he had to come off because he'd been booked. And that was kind of the strategy, was to just annoy Haaland and be physical with him. Obviously, in that away game in the league against City, he was unfortunately kind of bullied and drawn out of position and was beaten plenty, and that didn't look too good. And then Kivior came in and played right centre back and looked better and more attuned to what Arteta wants from a centre half. And maybe it was a bit of a shame that we didn't bring him in maybe
Mm.
slightly a bit sooner. So yeah, I'm thinking of others. Marquinhos as well, linked with Nantes. I think he might be going there. Olympiacos were initially the side that he was looking like he was going to, but Nantes have successfully come in, it seems. If he can do well in Liga, we've had a lot of success with Saliba, you know,
Yeah.
doing well in Liga, Balogun doing well in Liga. So why can't Marquinhos have the same effect and do really well? Fingers crossed. And Nicola Pepe is the last one, of course, who,
Yeah.
you know, I think will probably see a termination of his contract, even though Arsenal might be reluctant to do that. Because if you terminate his deal, you're probably spending, if you agree to pay off his wages, around £7 to £8 million to do that. Because he's on about 120, £140,000 per week. Besiktas said to be the club who don't want to pay a transfer fee. I'm hoping that they come to an agreement that means Arsenal don't have to pay money,
Yeah.
but money has dominated a lot of the discussions around where Pepe might go. So it does seem that's a key factor. And I don't think his reps will want to sacrifice 7, 8 odd million quid. But the pressure, I think, and the ball is in Pepe's court more than Arsenal, because Arsenal don't need him. They probably can just hold him in the squad for a year if they're desperate, and it'll be on Pepe to find a new club.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be really interesting to see kind of what happens with the players that go out. I think touching on Tierney, I think I get that because it depends how many minutes he gets this season, because I don't think he's a player that should really be benched all the time. I think he's like an old school defender. I love him. I think he's a great player who deserves time, and we know he was linked to Newcastle. Thankfully, he didn't go there, because I do love Tierney. There's a big part of me that wants him to stay, but I sort of feel like if he did get loaned out, if he did eventually move, I wouldn't blame him, because he deserves to play quite often. Like, I don't expect him to play every game, because I know a lot of the players do get rotated sometimes. Um, we do know our strongest lineup. We know Gabriel and Saliba will always play together. Like, those are the players. But and Sinchenko, I feel like when he doesn't play, I realise, like, when he's not playing, we really miss him. And going forward, he adds this quality that we sort of don't really have when he's not playing. But I think with Tierney, I would get if he got loaned out, because, you know, he doesn't really play a lot last season. He didn't get a lot of minutes, which I thought he should have had. But I think, you know, I'd understand if he left. But I think it would be really interesting with Rob Holding, because I'm with you. Like, I think he's really a really good defender, but he's just not Saliba's level. We've now seen Saliba and Gabriel, what they're capable of together, and I just think he's probably just not got the pace Saliba has. And we know against like Man City, Saliba can kind of deal with like the players like Haaland. But we've seen with Rob Holding, there's moments he can show that he can deal with it, but there's other times where he kind of really struggles with the pace. And we know that the Premier League changes. Better players come in, and I think you've got to keep getting better as a player. And I think with Rob Holding, I think he's just not at Sleeper's level, but I do think he deserves a bit of respect, because he still is really good. But I just think, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see kind of what we do with that. I did want to ask you about Fabio Vieira. In pre-season, I think he's done quite good. I think he's shown a bit of quality. He has. I think a lot of last season, I did think that in midfield he kind of gave the ball away, which kind of, you know, it wasn't great for us, and probably made us, you know, struggle in the game a bit more. For you, like, would you want to loan him this season, or would you kind of keep him with? Because I think squad depth, like we said, is massive for this team. Do you think we should keep him or loan him?
Yeah, I think there is scope more for him to get minutes. Arteta always seems keen to give him time from the bench.
Yeah.
I think in the group stage of the Champions League, we'll probably see him play some games. I think in obviously the cup competitions, we'll see him play some games. It was a real surprise when we signed him because obviously we invested a lot of money, £34 million, and he did really well for Porto before we bought him. You know, he was 20 plus goal contributions in the Portuguese league and was showing some real signs. The big question around Vieira has always been physically, is he combative
Mm,
enough to play in the Premier
yeah.
League? And I think he has learned a bit in the last year, and I think he is better physically. I think instead of just losing the ball, he
Mm,
wins fouls instead, which is what Xhaka used to do really, really well. Is that if he got caught in his own half, 9 times out of 10 is that he won a free kick instead of losing the ball. And I think the Vieira maybe needs to learn a bit more how to do that. Is to not just be pushed off, but actually like shield the ball, get into a position where if you're going to lose the ball, they're going to foul you. And I think that's maybe something that Vieira needed to learn and adapt to in the English league. He has quality. He has great execution with the ball at his feet. Those penalties, you know, I know he scored one against, I think it was Man United. I think that was more down to the pitch than anything else. It was a terrible pitch that day. But his penalty against Monaco was really good. And then his penalty against Manchester City was fantastic. You know, all the pressure in the world to win that game with that ball. And he's put it in the top left-hand corner. Goalkeeper's gone the right way. It doesn't matter. You know, and that level of composure and execution is a really good sign. Yes, it's only a penalty, but at the end of the day, you still have to pull that off. And I think that he has shown with some of his goals, the goal he scored against Barcelona, you know, what a goal that was. His goal he scored against Brentford last season, again, what a goal that was. I think he scored one in a friendly against Lyon in mid-season during the World Cup break as well. That was a really great strike too. So he clearly has got
mm,
something about him, and that's the reason why they signed him. It's just I think he's lacking a bit in confidence. The positive he's got from a social level is that he's really good friends with Martinelli, as everyone knows.
yeah.
There's a really good core of Portuguese-speaking players at the club, so he's not lonely. He's not got that kind of social side, and that is something I think some people overlook is the social side of the game as well, and that these are people as well as footballers. So he's got that, which is really good for him. Whereas players sometimes, you know, you look at Kivior, for instance, Polish player, doesn't, when, to my understanding, you know, I've tried to speak to him on a few occasions. He doesn't speak much English at all.
Yeah.
I don't know what other languages he speaks. He might speak a bit of Italian, but we don't really have, bar Jorginho, any Italian speakers. So, you know, to see how a player like that faces a lot of challenges from a communicative level, how they interact and how they assimilate into the side is going to be important. I think Kivior's done really well in that regard, but I think Vieira already has that cushion, if you like, of familiarity and communication with teammates. So, yeah, I think there's scope for him to play plenty of games. I just don't think a loan for Vieira is an option that would be beneficial enough to us this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I've had a big think about this, and I suppose in the pre-season game, like you said, the penalty against Man City, he seemed quite confident, and there's a lot of pressure on you in that moment, and he just went for it. And he obviously, the goalkeeper did go the right way, but he still went in, and he seems like full of confidence at the moment. And in the pre-season, he's done quite well. So I think for me, I probably would keep him at Arsenal this season because yes, we know Odegaard, we know our midfield of Partey and Declan Rice, they would probably pay before him, but there's always that option of giving him the chance to come on for minutes and probably improve as a player. So I think I'd probably give him a chance this season to see how it goes. And like you said, he gets on with Martinelli. I think he gets the team as well. So I hope, this season will be a good one for him. And hopefully, yeah, but I've really enjoyed talking to you today, Tom. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Before we kind of end this, I did briefly tell people that you do have your channel, which is Gooner Talk TV. Do you want to just tell our people a bit about what sort of content you produce on there?
Yeah, sure. The main thing, the niche, if you like, is the 8 a.m. show. We do one every single day, every single morning. Whether I'm away at a game, even when I was on my honeymoon, we recorded a number of shows that went out to make sure that we were having something go out every single day. Even though it wasn't live at the time for very obvious reasons. But yeah, we do a live show every single day at 8 a.m. But we also do like breakdowns of transfer targets. We have guests on. And yeah, it's overall just a lot of fun talking about Arsenal. Day job wise, I work for Football.London. I go to the games home and away to cover the team, chat to the players, chat to the manager when I get a chance. And that's obviously a big honour to be able to do that. So lots of insight, lots of inside stuff. And yeah, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Sophie, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, I really appreciate you coming on. I've really enjoyed this, and I will put your channel in the description and in the title of the video as well. But to those that might want to follow you on Twitter or Instagram, could you just let people know where to follow you?
Yeah, on Twitter at the Gooner Talk TV and just at the Gooner Talk, I think it is on Instagram. But I'm really neglect my Instagram. I should
Yeah, I'm more of a
should
Twitter person. Yeah, I don't really use
or X.
Instagram.
I'm an X person, as it's called now, isn't it? It's posts instead of tweets, and yeah, can't keep up with it all.
Yeah, me too. It's all changing. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoy this video to those that are watching it back. I really enjoyed doing this, and make sure to smash the like button, subscribe, and I shall see you all on my next video. Bye.